Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Benbow and this is my research on the engagement in cross-curricular instruction. First, as my introduction, I am a 5th grade teacher at Washington Elementary in the school district of Lancaster. This is my 4th year teaching and I teach math and science. I teach two different classes of that. This is my first year teaching math and science. Prior to this year, I taught math and social studies. I am in the ACTE program with a concentration in STEM, and this is my last class, which is pretty exciting. Like many of you, I get the chance to graduate in a couple of days. So the purpose of my study, my goal or my hope to learn from this was to learn about the impact of teaching science and math cross-curricularly. Prior to this year, math and social studies were taught by the same teacher, and then ELA and science were taught by the same teacher. And because they were split up that way, science and math didn't really plan together or interact at all. Because of the way that it was split up. And so this year, I was able to get a chance to kind of look to see the impact of teaching that math and science cross-curricularly. The problem that I'm trying to solve or attack was the lack of representation and engagement in STEM fields of student of color. Working in the school district of Lancaster, the majority of my students identify as students of color. So this is an issue that I really identify with and resonates with me. Engaging students of color at an early age can increase their chance of continuing into the STEM field. And currently at my school, there aren't a lot of ways to engage students in STEM. We don't have any programs or any activities, and other than just the instruction of science and math, that's kind of it. So just kind of seeing what I can do in my role to kind of increase the engagement in those two areas so that they have more of a chance to be in STEM later on in life. So I only had one research question, and my research question was, what is the effect of cross-curricular math and science instruction on student engagement, specifically with students of color? Moving on to my literature review. In my first study done in 2019, teachers tried to create a space for multidisciplinary instruction with engineering and science. So in the design of this study, they had cross concepts from engineering and science. Even though they were in two different classes, the goal was to go back and forth and kind of bring them in where they could to those specific content areas. The big takeaways from this is that students were observed naturally creating their own space for multidisciplinary instruction. So when they were working in groups or working in partners, they would bring in science and engineering, even if they were in the opposite content class. They would bring in the knowledge from both to be able to talk about or understand the concepts. Teachers decided or could see that it improved literacy in science and engineering and just improved students' overall understanding of the concept. This relates to my research because my goal was to do the exact same thing with science and math. To bring them in where I could, bring science into math where I could, and math into science where I could, to just kind of get students to think of them as working together as opposed to two separate content areas or two separate subjects. In my second study, it looked at the effects of implementing virtual reality as a way to increase student engagement. During this study, there were no links to academic achievement based on the virtual reality assignments. However, they were able to see that it did increase engagement and increase the connections that student made to the content. It also increased student choice and their ownership that they had in taking part in their own learning. In my third study with Nadelson and Callahan in 2014, Teachers implemented an engineering program called Brick Lab. This program was implemented through several years, and the study looked at the results over several years. They found that the continuity of the program helped to increase engagement with students as they were familiar with the content and familiar with the activities that were presented to them. This applies to my own research because it showed the importance of continuity, which is something that is happening in my school. So the way that it works is 5th grade and 4th grade are in the dyads where we teach the two subjects. So students will be getting that math and science cross-curricular instruction in 4th grade, and then also getting it with the same curriculum, just the 5th grade version of it in 5th grade. And so just kind of seeing the importance of connecting with those 4th grade teachers and moving up into as they move into 5th grade, and seeing the impact that it can have in student learning. And how important that will be in terms of getting our students to be engaged in STEM later on in life. In my fourth study done in 2015, it is where teachers implemented a cross-curricular project or activity that went across multiple classrooms and multiple content areas. The project was designed to be engaging for students, but they really struggled to do their project on their own. It was designed to give them a lot of freedom of choice and leadership, kind of like Sun et al. Study that I had on the other page, but students were given too much freedom and weren't really ready for the level of leadership that they needed to have on this project, which did the complete opposite of engaging those students. They were left disengaged and unmotivated and really just struggled with the content, as well as struggled with completing that assignment. From the teacher aspect, it was really difficult because they had to plan together, but then also implement each part in their own content areas. It was also difficult to give over that control of the different aspects of the projects to other teachers that they were working with. This applies to my own research because this is kind of the suggestions or struggles of what not to do, specifically with the students leading their own projects. I do believe it's important for the assignments that are cross-curricular to be student-led. However, making sure that they're at my students' level, and that's something that can kind of set them up for success so that they still have that positive engagement in math and science. I think another note to make is just that multiple classroom and multiple teacher aspect can be very challenging and really complicate the process of the project. And for my own sake, that might be something I want to think about if I were to do a cross curricular activity with multiple classrooms and teachers. In my last study from Beals in 2021, this study followed a group of minority students through a science program. They provided different activities and leadership roles that were available to them that allowed students to really engage with their science and give them real life experiences. The students left the program feeling like that was the most real life science experience that they've had, and that it really prepared them for STEM roles or STEM fields later on in the future with the knowledge and the activities and just the experience that they gave them. I chose to look at this study and use this study because this is kind of where I want to head with my students, being able to give them engaging activities, but also science activities and math activities that like prepare them for not necessarily the real world because they're 5th grade, but that real world transition, and kind of give them that experience where they feel successful and feel comfortable moving into STEM areas later on in middle school and high school because they have that experience with me. Now on to the design of my research. So the design was the implementation of cross-curricular instruction. So I took some of the concept from math and some of the concept from science and kind of intertwined them. Then I also took classroom observations where I was looking at engagement. The 3 areas that I was looking for was physical, verbal, and written engagement. And then I also had weekly teacher journals that would detail any other noticings or experiences that I had while teaching. So the review or the results, overall, students were really engaged through the lessons. Looking at the results, it was a little more than I had originally expected of students who were engaged according to the criteria that was identified. It looked like students were most engaged during verbal activities, and physically seeing them, that's when I saw that they were also the most engaged, was during our verbal activities. Students were the least engaged during written activities, but I want to preface that by saying that the written activities only happened once or twice when I was observing because it was a little difficult to teach and observe at the same time. So they did not do a lot of writing while I was doing the observations. I think it only happened during 2 observations. It was clear to see that students were more engaged than science, and in math, it was a huge difference in levels of engagement in science and math. I think some of this was just due to the science curriculum and the setup. Science has investigations and times to explore. It also just kind of allows for more inquiry and interest, so students are able to ask more questions and have wonderings about it and make their own connections, where math is for 5th grade and with the curriculum that I'm using is definitely more procedural and more learning of how to do a specific skill versus being able to kind of apply that and take it and ask questions, which can be really engaging for students. I also want to note that science was taught first or is taught first. So I have a 2-hour block, and so the first half hour of our block is science, and then the next hour and a half is math. So that could also make a difference in terms of just the stamina of my students. So some conclusions that I made. So overall, students were more engaged than my regular expectations, or original expectations, sorry. The high engagement with the students talking has caused me to incorporate more opportunities for students to share their thinking with others. It's really made me look at the impact that has had for my students. There's been lots of times where students are able to kind of guide each other just through their partner conversations. And in math, it gives them an opportunity to kind of show off what they know and give them a little more confidence about the information that they know. The lesser number of students engaged could be due to the switch from teacher instruction to independent in math. The way that our curriculum and our math block is set up is there's teacher instruction, and then we switch to rotation. So there's partner, independent, and then teacher driven or teacher instruction, small group. And so I think that I lost my students when we went from that teacher driven whole group to that rotation model, just because there are some students who I feel like probably don't have the confidence to do things necessarily by themselves. And so one of the things that I want to do for next time is just kind of look at how to bridge that gap. My role as a teacher, I feel like this just showed me how my students are really engaged in what they're really learning. I felt like I knew it a little bit before, but just focusing in on how students interacted with the science and math curriculum has just changed how I go about thinking about planning for my math block and even my science block as well, and just providing more of those inquiry. I know my students like to ask those questions, providing those opportunities while still giving them the content. To project this information for my school, I would like to meet with the 4th grade teachers who also teach that math and science, just to kind of give them some of my information and just kind of what I learned, but also kind of see what they are seeing, if they're seeing the same things, and then talk about strategies of how we can incorporate math and science in fourth grade together, and then in fifth grade, and then see how we can like bridge those gaps and make the connection from year to year, seeing as the cross-curricular aspect is done by us or on our own, not necessarily by our own curriculum. So it would be crucial kind of to get on the same page with that as well. Thank you for listening and watching. I look forward to seeing all your results